Ryan Bell had always seemed like someone who had it all figured out. At 28, he lived a quiet but creative life in the small town of Ashmore, Oregon. He freelanced as a photographer, often traveling to nearby forests and coastlines to capture nature's quiet beauty. Those who knew him described him as thoughtful and private, the kind of man who avoided drama and valued his space. But everything started to unravel after his breakup with Julia Crane. Their relationship had lasted nearly a year. At first, they seemed perfect together, both artistic, introverted, and drawn to the same kind of slow, minimalist lifestyle. But as time went on, friends noticed Ryan becoming withdrawn. He stopped attending local art shows, missed family calls, and rarely responded to texts. Some chalked it up to creative burnout, others suspected personal trouble. A few weeks before he vanished, he finally broke up with Julia. According to his sister, he told her over the phone that he felt like himself again. Then, Ryan disappeared. On the morning of August 9th, Ryan failed to show up for a scheduled photo shoot, something completely out of character. When police entered his apartment, they found his keys on the counter, his wallet in the bedroom, and his phone powered off on the couch. Nothing appeared out of place. There was no sign of struggle, no forced entry, no note. He had simply ceased to exist. Weeks passed with no answers. A search turned up nothing. Then, 2 months later, Julia's new boyfriend received a message from Ryan's Instagram account. It was a single sentence: "She always comes back." The message was quickly deleted and the account was deactivated. But by then, the damage was done. Ryan's disappearance was no longer just a mystery, it was a warning. As investigators re-examined Ryan Bell's case, they started with the person closest to his final days, Julia Crane. She cooperated at first, offering her version of events: a peaceful breakup, mutual respect, no hard feelings. But something about her story didn't sit right. The message from Ryan's deleted. Instagram hinted at unfinished business. When police ran a background check, a disturbing pattern began to surface. 3 years earlier, Julia had been in a relationship with Ben Wilder, a teacher from Salem. They broke up in late autumn, and within 2 weeks, Ben vanished without a trace. At the time, his disappearance was brushed off as a possible suicide. He'd recently lost a parent and reportedly suffered from anxiety. His car was found near a bridge, but no body ever surfaced. Police didn't connect it to foul play until now. Digging deeper, detectives uncovered 2 more missing persons cases linked to Julia. One in Boise, Idaho, Darren Lee, a musician who left town after their breakup and was never heard from again. Another in Eureka, California, Tom Reeves, who quit his job suddenly and disappeared shortly after ending things with her. Each case had been closed or forgotten. None had been connected to Julia. The most chilling part? Julia had moved on quickly after each breakup. New relationships began within days, as if she were simply stepping from one life into another without pause. Her social media presence remained curated and cheerful, full of photos and poetic captions, never hinting at turmoil. As these stories emerged, the investigation took on a new urgency. This wasn't about one missing man. It was about a possible serial pattern. And all the victims had one detail in common. They had all tried to walk away from Julia, only to disappear shortly after. A month into the reopened investigation, police received an anonymous tip about a remote farmhouse just outside the Ashmore town limits. The property, long abandoned and overgrown with ivy and moss, had been left to Julia by an uncle who passed away years earlier. Locals had barely noticed the place. Some didn't even know it belonged to her. According to records, no one had. Lived there for over a decade, but the tip claimed otherwise. When officers arrived, the exterior appeared undisturbed. The front door was jammed shut from the inside, and windows were boarded up. Once inside, they found the usual decay: broken furniture, dust, and silence. But in the basement, they noticed something odd. The measurements didn't match the blueprint on file. A wall had been added. Behind it, they uncovered a sealed door leading to a small hidden room. Inside, the air was cold and stale. The room was soundproofed with old mattress foam and lined with insulation. On a rusted table sat several personal items: a cracked wristwatch, a journal with Ryan Bell's handwriting, a bracelet that belonged to Ben Wilder. There were Polaroids scattered across the floor, some of landscapes, others of frightened, disheveled men staring into the lens, some barely conscious. One camera remained powered on. Inside was a photo time-stamped just weeks before Ryan disappeared. It showed a dimly lit space. In the background, a man resembling Ryan sat against a wall, his arms bound. Though no bodies were found, blood residue on the floor indicated violence. Investigators also discovered cages in a back corner and empty, syringes in a drawer. It was clear this room hadn't been built for storage. Someone had been kept here. And whoever cleaned the place had done so recently, almost like they knew someone was coming. With the discovery of the hidden basement room, Julia Crane was brought in for questioning. Calm and composed, she denied ever visiting the farmhouse. In recent years, claiming she had no idea what the police were talking about. Without physical evidence tying her directly to the room or the missing men, she was released after a short detention. But investigators were far from finished. Surveillance footage from nearby traffic cameras showed a person matching her height and build entering the property days before the search, though the figure wore a mask and heavy clothing, making a positive ID impossible. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling theory. Julia hadn't been hiding bodies. She had been hiding people. A forensic psychologist reviewing the case proposed that Julia might have been exercising a form of psychological control rather than physical violence, breaking down her victims emotionally, isolating them, then making sure they could never truly leave her. The messages that followed added to the mystery. Several of Julia's former acquaintances began receiving strange texts and emails. Some came from deactivated accounts. Others had no identifiable sender. They contained cryptic phrases: "She never lets go," "You're next," and "Look." Behind the door. One woman who briefly dated one of the missing men before Julia found a flash drive left on her porch. It contained grainy audio files, men whispering, crying, breathing heavily in fear. All signs pointed to something orchestrated, methodical, and deeply personal. Someone was watching those who had even brushed close to the truth. Someone who didn't want to be found but wanted people to know they were still out there. Whether it was Julia acting alone or with help remained unclear. But one thing was certain: the mind games weren't over. They were only just beginning. 6 months after the farmhouse discovery and Julia's release, everything went quiet. No new evidence, no arrests, no confirmed sightings. Then, as suddenly as she had entered the spotlight, Julia Crane vanished. She didn't tell anyone she was leaving. Her apartment was untouched, with dishes still in the sink and her phone charging beside her bed. Her car remained in the parking lot. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. It was as if she had walked out the door and dissolved into thin air. At first, people assumed she'd gone into hiding. Maybe the pressure had become too much. But what came next made that theory hard to believe. One by one, women connected to Julia's former partners began receiving strange, personalized messages. The first were simple: names and dates. Then photos appeared, dark, grainy, often showing men with hollow eyes, surrounded by darkness, staring into the camera. Some looked like they hadn't seen daylight in years. One woman received a USB drive left on her front porch. On it was a video. A man, gaunt and barely able to speak, whispered something again and again. "She never left. She never left." His voice cracked, but his eyes were clear. He wasn't dead. He wasn't free either. Authorities tried to trace the origins of these messages, But every lead ended in a dead zone. Burner phones, public Wi-Fi access points, or entirely fake IP addresses. It was like someone was orchestrating the entire thing from nowhere and everywhere at once. Online communities exploded with theories. Julia was part of a secret society. She'd been taken by one of her victims. She was a victim herself. But nothing could be proven. The case remains unsolved, the disappearances unexplained, and the messages haven't stopped. They still come, quiet reminders that sometimes breakups don't end. They evolve.